really wanted to get into broadcast. I really wanted to get into sports, radio, play-by-play. So I wrote you a letter, and you sent me this back, and you said, "Thank for the nice letter, best wishes, Len and Bob." And I kept this because I knew someday I would get the opportunity, and I knew someday I'd be doing what I want to do, but I'd never thought in a million years that I'd be getting the opportunity on the other side of town. But needless to say, this is an amazing opportunity. Thank you so much.
Well, it's my pleasure, Christian, and call me Len, first of all. My dad is Mr. Kasper.
Mr. Kasper. It's okay. It's just like it's like I'm on the edge. Like, I don't know, it's still
No,
like,
I totally,
I still see you up there I still have that much respect for you, obviously. So, but
I appreciate it.
Yeah, no problem. First off, obviously, congrats on the new job. How's everything been since that all went down? And was it one of the toughest decisions you've had to make? Because I do recall you were quoted saying in 2004 when you left the Marlins to go to Chicago, you didn't want to leave Florida, but it was an opportunity that you couldn't pass up, to quote you. How hard was this move?
Yeah, even more difficult.
Yeah.
I think what made it a little easier is that we were not looking to, pardon me, we were not looking to leave Chicago. And that, I don't think I would have considered going to another city. So
Right.
Staying here was really important. Leaving the Cubs was very difficult. But, as I added up all the great experiences and memories, 16 seasons, a World Series championship, an amazing rebuild, a lot of friends who will be friends for the rest of my life, and the chance to get back into radio, which is something I had really adored when I was a kid. And I just thought, the first half of my career was in television, and I thought maybe the back end of it could be in radio, and if not now, probably never. So I just decided to kind of go for it. Yeah, it was scary and mysterious and uncertain, but I haven't regretted it 1 second, and I'm totally pumped about the season coming up. It's been pretty quiet, to answer your first part of your question, how it's gone since the decision, just because of the pandemic. I haven't even been at the ballpark yet.
Oh, wow.
So it's been a lot of Zoom calls and remote conversations, but I really look forward to being back at the ballpark and around people. That's the thing I miss the most.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's just been a wild past season. I mean, I never thought that I'd be seeing you and JD call a game at Wrigley, but it's a road game for the Cubs. That's just strange. I mean, that had to be weird too, because I mean, as an announcer, a lot of the call and a lot of what you guys do is based on the crowd as well, calling a home run. Sometimes they could tell you where it's going before you know where it's going. So was that a little bit difficult this past season, trying to adjust and just wait instead of, how you normally would call a game?
For sure. It was a challenge that I tried to accept with as much positive energy as possible, as opposed to, ruining the fact that things were going to be a little more difficult than we're used to. And I thought we pulled it off. If we're at 100% accuracy when we're at the ballpark, I would say we got to about 85%, being away from the action and watching on monitors. It wasn't perfect by any stretch. I think discerning viewers and listeners could probably hear a little hesitation at times, but for the most part, we were able to get on the air, and it looked and sounded generally like a regular broadcast. But I have to say, I don't want that to continue much longer. I think the best way to call the game is to be in the booth where the action is happening. And I'm pretty hopeful that we'll be there at some point here in 2021.
Yeah, I hope. Now, something I wasn't quite aware of was when I watched your introductory press conference for the White Sox, which was interesting. It was just a weird adjustment. Was the love, admiration, and inspiration that Ernie Harwell had on you. And I found it really moving that when I believe you made the move from the Marlins to Chicago, or to the Marlins, he called you or reached out to you, and you made the move from Florida to Chicago, he called you. Now you made the move to the White Sox, doing what you grew up listening him doing, call games on the radio. not get that call because of him, God rest his soul. Was that something that hit you hard? Getting that transition to do radio now, not getting that call by the man who inspired you to do this.
Yeah, I think it was just one of those days where a lot of emotions were hitting me, and
Mm-hmm.
just thinking about exactly that Ernie had reached out when I had made these big moves, and he had passed away about 10 years ago, and
Right.
I know he would have been really proud of the decision, and I had so many friends in the business reach out to me and express their support. And
Mm-hmm.
and to be honest, a lot of people wondered, okay, why would you go from Cubs television to White Sox radio? And
Right.
after 4 or 5 minutes of explaining, they're like, okay, I get it. And it was a move that wasn't made out of trying to get more money, more
Right.
fame, more whatever. It was all about kind of what's deep in my soul as a broadcaster. And I think at the end of the day, hopefully people can appreciate that. And there were some Cubs fans who were not real happy with me,
Right.
which I actually took as a good sign that they liked what I did.
Yeah.
I expected some of that, but for the most part, people have been really, really great.
Yeah. No, absolutely. And I think, obviously you mentioned that leaving Florida you didn't want to do, but it had to make it a little bit easier knowing that, hey, you aren't actually leaving the city that has fostered you and welcomed you for the past 16, 15 years. You're just relocating within. Was that another easy part of the move as well, knowing that, hey, I'm not leaving you guys. I'm just, picking up a new job down the street?
I mean, psychologically, it's an enormous change,
Sure.
not only for me, but for my family. But yes, I think the literally not having to pack and move to a different place was a big part of why uh, this became something that was realistic to do.
Mm-hmm.
As I said, I really can't think of a scenario in which we would have moved to another place to do radio or even television. I think the Cubs job is as good as it gets, and really, I'm not sure there's another team or another situation that would have been quote better.
Mm-hmm.
So the timing just happened to work out where the one job opened that intrigued me, and I went for it. And yeah, it's something that probably won't happen a whole lot down the road. But there is history of White Sox
Sure.
Cubs. Jack Brickhouse did both teams for a while. I want to say Bob Elson might have done some Cubs. Obviously, Harry Carey went from the White Sox to the Cubs. Steve Stone has
Yep.
done both. So there is precedent for it, although in most cases it's White Sox to Cubs. I went in the other direction.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think Stone went from Cubs to White Sox or whatever it was. But yeah, I feel like it's like they share each other. It's kind of interesting. But yeah, that's wild. Now, another thing that I found quite interesting too is not only while you're managing to do, your job as play by play, you also would manage to pull some weight at formerly the Illinois Center for Broadcasting, but the Illinois Media School, and working with students and working with people trying to get into this industry. What was so important about being involved in that side of it too, and helping influence and inspire that next generation of broadcast?
Well, I think because of how Ernie treated me,
Mm-hmm.
it was really important to kind of pass it along to young broadcasters. And I've had a lot who've reached out to me over the years. I actually mentor a student at Marquette University, my alma mater,
Right.
every school year. So, I try to be as open and honest as I can with the
Mm-hmm.
young people who want to get into the business. It's a difficult business in a lot
Sure.
of ways because it's such a popular field. But there are a few things along the way that you can point out that I was fortunate to be told when I was 19 and 22 and 25 about how to go about it. A
Mm-hmm.
lot of it you have to learn simply through experience and maybe a little failure along the way. But there are no shortcuts. I think
Sure.
that's the number one thing. But it can never hurt to have someone who's been through the ropes a little bit and can kind of help you navigate through those possibilities. You have to remember when I came up, the internet was not a thing.
Right.
Podcasts were not a thing. Social media was not available. I didn't even have an email address. So finding a way to contact people in the
Right.
business was a lot more difficult, let alone the idea of everybody being pretty reachable at the snap of your fingers. So it has changed a lot. I think specialization is no longer a thing. Saying I want to be a radio person, or I want to be on TV, or I want to do this. You kind of have to be able to do all of it
Right.
in some form or fashion. And I think that's okay. And unfortunately, even back then, I think I was well-rounded, but the best advice now is just every bit of experience you can get will help you down the road.
Sure. And I think you mentioned the internet and stuff like that. Before, when you started out, it had to be a little bit more difficult trying to put together, your run book or whatever, your play by your notes and all that stuff, because you actually had to really dive deep and dig for the research. Now you have, at the touch of your fingers, every stat dating back to. So, I mean, has that really, over the years, how has that changed and made the job easier and more, just easier? Has it been a blessing over the years to see that switch and change in availability and access to information that helps you guys call the games?
There's no question it's easier to find information, but in a
Sure.
weird way, it's more of a challenge now because that information is generally available to the audience. Whereas before, you get a media guide and a few other notes, the pretty basic biographical information about players was not widely available. So that stuff was what you used. Now, most of that stuff is pretty easy to find. So the challenge is to dig even deeper to find interesting stories or notes about players or teams or situations that you maybe can't find on the internet. And if you can find it, you try to then use that to either talk to the player or kind of take a different angle or approach to it. So I would say it is easier than ever to find the information and to gather it. But it's so overwhelming. Sometimes you have to be able to sift through all the stuff that's not particularly interesting and find those little needles in the haystacks to do on the air. And I really enjoy that part of it. And the bottom line is, if it interests me, I feel like I can make it interesting to the viewer or the listener, as opposed to trying to find stuff that I think other people will be interested in. When you do that, sometimes you can't really sell the info, but when it really captures your attention, I think that's a good, note to follow your gut.
Yeah, for sure. Absolutely. Now, what's a typical game day routine look like for someone in your position? I've talked to a few people like Chuck Swirsky when I did some reporting for them for a website I wrote for, and I'd get there 2 hours before a game, and I had asked him how long he's been there. I've been here 5 hours already. I'm like, what? The game's at 7 at night. You've been here at 1? What's the daily routine like? Let's say for a 1:20 start at Wrigley. What's the day? What is game day routine like for someone in the booth?
Well, the day games, it's definitely a little more squeezed because the early start, but I'm probably at the ballpark by 9:30, 9:45.
Oh, not too bad.
I've already done maybe an hour and a half of work at home, reading all the articles on both teams. A lot of your preparation for baseball, because it is almost every day, comes from the night before. So I'll try to get to the ballpark 9:45, 10 o'clock, go down to the clubhouse for a half hour, talk to the managers, some players, media relations staff, find out if there's any news of the day. I might pop over to the other team's clubhouse if I have any questions. Typically for a day game, there might not even be batting practice. So I'm up in the booth by 10:45, 11 o'clock. And then those next 2 hours are filling out your scorecard, going over what we're going to talk about on the pregame coverage, and get ready to roll. So yeah, I'd say typically for a 7 o'clock game, I'm there around 3 o'clock. So you spend a good 7-8 hours at the park every day, but it's a 365-day
Yeah.
job. Even in the off season, I'm looking at stories about players and things and doing
Oh,
research,
wow.
and you're constantly updating and keeping tabs on what's going on in the business. And without doing that, it becomes a lot more onerous when you have a
Sure.
game coming up against a team that you have no information on. I generally keep general tabs on all 30 teams, so I'm not too surprised by much.
Right. Now you mentioned that in the off season, even working and stuff like that. What is that research and stuff? Where is that going? Is that just notes that you take down and use, for the upcoming season, or is this stuff that are you writing stories and putting out content elsewhere, or what? I mean, where does all that research and documentation that you go and do in the off season translate
It's
and
all
pour into next
it's
year?
all yeah, it's all for me.
Okay.
I have a player profile. Uh, I guess it's a text edit document.
Oh, okay.
I'm a Mac guy,
Yeah,
so
me too.
yeah, it would be like Word, but so I
Sure.
use text edit, and so I have a file for player profiles. I have a file on every team with historical notes,
Mm,
just general things about the team and the manager and the front office and things like that, and ballpark information. And so I try to keep those as up to date as I can as we're
right.
recording this podcast. The Cardinals are close to acquiring Nolan Arenado from the
Oh,
Rockies,
wow.
so I will, definitely make note of that for his file and for my
Mm-hmm.
Cardinals notes. So things like that. It's just news of the day.
Right.
No matter when it happens, I'm always kind of keeping as up to date as I can on the league and
Right.
and what's going on.
Sure, absolutely. Now, I know a big part of the move to the South Side is radio is the fact of the dream of being able to call a World Series, possibly. When you look back at your time with the Cubs and just in your career, what's the most memorable game you've called so far? Because obviously during the playoffs, you know that that's a thing that gets stripped of the local or the home team play-by-play announcers. It's all national. Now you get the opportunity to possibly do this with the South Side. What's the most amazing game you've ever called in your career? Because the playoffs, unfortunately, was not something that
Yeah,
we were able to
there've
do.
been there've been a lot of them. I think of a comeback against the Rockies in 15. I think Chris Bryant
Bryant walk-off, yeah.
hit the game-ending home run. I think of the game against Milwaukee in '07 that ended with a Ramirez home run off Francisco Cordero.
Mm-hmm.
That call is one that a lot of people remember. I think of opening day in '08. I think Kosuke Fukudome hit a
Yeah,
game-tying homer in the ninth. The Cubs actually lost that game in extra innings, but I just remember his debut was really neat. But there are a lot of games along the way. Javier Baez in his debut hitting the big home run in extra innings in Colorado.
yeah.
Starlin Castro's debut, homer and a triple, 6 RBIs. I mean,
There's just
there are
too
a
many.
million.
Yeah,
Yeah, there are too many to name. But I'd say the Ramirez homer against Milwaukee, that the way that game finished, definitely stands out to me.
absolutely. Now, when you look back at your time with the Cubs, did you ever imagine you'd be a part of a 100 plus loss losing Cubs team and then 114 win Cubs team, including the playoffs combined, with only 4 years of separation between the two? I mean, has there ever been a complete 180 of performance and progression in the history of the league in such a short period of time, do you think?
No, I look back and the road felt longer than it was. But
Sure.
yeah, to have a team that was at the bottom of the league. I mean, the Astros kind of did it too. They
Yeah.
would go on to win the World Series the following year. But no, I knew that Theo Epstein and Jed Hoyer, and eventually when they hired Joe Madden, that they would get it done.
Mm-hmm.
But I could not have imagined they would do it the way it went. And 2015 that's the year that kind of gets lost in the shuffle.
Right.
The big 4-game sweep against the Giants in August, the win against the Pirates, Jake Arrieta in the wild card game, beating the Cardinals in that postseason series with Schwarber's big home run on the top of the right field scoreboard. I mean, that year was, look, it's not as fun when you end up losing in the NLCS, but I think in getting swept, but it just gave everybody a taste of what could come next.
Sure.
And as much fun as 16 was and as historic and amazing, I think, the year before you could see the seeds of that. And that year in particular really stands out.
Absolutely. Now, when you're up in the booth with JD, you guys are fortunate enough because a lot of those seventh inning stretch guests, the guest conductors, they'll come up in that booth. Over the years, what has been your favorite guest or guest that you've had the opportunity to have up there in the booth and do those short in-inning interviews with?
Eddie Vedder always stands out. He's such a good dude. We've had Sting. We didn't interview Sting, but I got to meet him.
Awesome.
Tim Robbins. There are a lot of really cool celebrities. We've had a few who didn't quite get the song right. Jeff Gordon stands out. That became a big story, but he was really nice. But generally, the people who grew up Cubs fans, the ex-players, those interviews are always a lot of fun. And the stretch is a pretty special thing at the ballpark. I missed doing it last year. We ended up having all of them on the scoreboard. But that'll change. And I look forward when the White Sox and Cubs play to experience that again a couple of times a year.
It's going to be a little different sitting in a different booth at Wrigley when that time comes, though. A little bit strange. That's wild. Now, getting away from baseball a little bit, I know you're really into music. You love music. And you find time to play, little one-off gigs or just sit in and just play live music. How do you find that time during, let's say, a regular season when you're on the road? Do you ever have time to break free, catch a drink, watch a little live music, and then get back to action the next day? How do you manage to still keep up with your love for music in addition to calling the game you love?
I think it's really important during the season to have some hobbies and interests that are not related at all to baseball. You got to take your mind away from it because it's such an immersion for 6 to 8 months every year. And I think mentally that break is important. So I seek out those moments as much as I can. And I miss that's I miss traveling. I miss being able to explore different cities and check out new places. But I've been able to fortunately get to see a lot of cool music over the years based on my travels. And I'm just so pumped to be able to do that again at some point, and I hope it's sooner than later. We need live music. We need it desperately. A lot of these small clubs are barely hanging on, and that's why I hope we can open things up as soon as possible.
Right, especially theater in Wrigleyville too, the Metro. I mean, they shut their doors. I don't think it's permanently, but it's just because they can't afford to keep it open. It costs like $9,000 a month for a place like that, even with the lights off and everything off, just to still keep the business running, which is really unfortunate. It sucks. Like when it does come back, it's like, where are they gonna play? That's the sad thing about it. So I'm glad we finally got the thing passed for the Save Our Stages, which is great. But when you were growing up, what are some of your early inspirations when it comes to music? I know I've seen that Buddy Guy was a huge one for you. I think, who was the other one? The Romantics, I believe, was that one of them? What were some of those early inspirations for you, and how'd that kind of mold you? Because music can mold you into a person. It can form an identity for you as you develop and mature. What was the band that really kind of molded you and matured you over the years? A band that you kind of can identify with as, this is me.
Wow, that's a really hard one to answer, but I actually grew up listening to my mom's records, the
Sure.
Beatles, the Stones,
Hmm.
the Monkees.
Yeah.
My grandfather was into Johnny Cash. I actually saw Johnny live
Oh, wow.
in 1979, which and got to meet him, which was really quite a thrill for me. But yeah, I'm a product of the '80s. The Romantics from Detroit were a band that I've seen more than any other, and really love the power pop kind of stuff that they've put out over the years.
Hmm.
The band I probably connect with the most, I mean, that changes. At one
Sure.
point, I would have said the Replacements. I think now the Church, a great Australian band that got started in the early '80s, definitely connect with them.
Hmm.
But I try to be as open as I can to new music in particular,
Right.
and that keeps me young and not just rely on the bands that I listened to growing up. So I talk to my 19-year-old son, and he sends me new music all the time, and I never want to be the person who says, all this music today, is not as good as it was back when I grew up. There's
Right.
a lot of great music now, and I try to be as open to that as I can.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know even with the Cubs, they would have events at the Metro where you'd have Eddie Vedder, Buddy Guy, and stuff like that. Being a part of those moments had to be special.
Amazing, amazing to be on stage and just to watch Eddie do what he does, and to have Buddy Guy a couple of years ago play just a blistering set.
Yeah,
It was really amazing. I've met so many cool people and a lot of heroes of mine, and they've become friends, and um, that that's something I cherish. And again, I miss. We haven't been able to do that for the last year,
sure.
and I'm dying to be back at Metro on stage with all these great musicians.
Absolutely. Now, a question that I love bringing up because a lot of people don't, I feel, don't actually have the time to really think about it because everyone I've talked to, they're usually super busy. But have you ever had enough time to sit down and really grasp, understand, and compartmentalize the fact of what you've been able to do and how blessed you are to have done what you've done so far in your life? I mean, because you're always on the road. You don't have much time, I would think, to just sit back and go, "Wow, I'm blessed." Like, do you have that time? And what is that moment like for you when you're able to just realize, like, "Wow, I have it. Like, this is great." Do you have those moments where you're able to realize exactly how special and fortunate your job is?
All the time. You can't let it affect how you do your job, and
Right.
you know you can't just kick your feet up and say I have it made and I don't need
Sure.
to continue to work. But I absolutely know and understand how special this whole thing is, and it's a huge responsibility. And when people tell me that I'm part of their family because they watch baseball every single day, that means the world to me. And
Right.
I don't take any of it lightly, but I try not to take myself too seriously and understand that it's the position I hold, not necessarily me.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, no, I'm very lucky. I'm very fortunate to have been able to be around the ballpark and meet all my heroes, and to be able to have the best seat in the house and call that my job.
Mm-hmm.
The fact that they pay me to have the best seat in the
Yeah.
house, I mean, that's I'm the luckiest guy in the world in that way. But I still have a deep desire and drive to be better every day
Right.
and to be the best broadcaster I can be. And I never want to lose that. And I think that fits into the move I made, is making sure that I'm always challenging myself intellectually and emotionally connecting to everything I do in this business. And
Sure.
that's why I'm so jazzed about this move, is that it's something completely different from what I've experienced,
Right.
and that has me incredibly excited.
Mm-hmm. Now, it is obviously a different move, but is the routine is yes, obviously you're going from TV to radio. Is that routine the structure and the format, the traditional routine of still calling a game, is that going to remain the same, or is it a completely different way of broadcast?
I think it remains to be seen.
Sure.
I'm going to probably approach it initially very similarly to how I have for the last 20 years.
Mm-hmm.
And I think a lot of that will translate, but there may be tweaks and things that I need to be more aware of in my
Right.
preparation, because a lot of my job now is about the what as opposed to the how and the why.
Mm-hmm.
So when it comes to describing what I see for the listener, there's a lot more detail in that
Right.
that I need to be aware of, as opposed to on television where everybody can see what I'm
See.
talking about. So it's a different part of the brain, I guess, that gets
Mm-hmm.
exercised and challenged. But I very much look forward to that, and I'm sure that as time goes on, that preparation will change just a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. Because like when I listen to the radio, it's always listening to Pat saying, "Cubs out here in the white, blue pinstripes." You've got to visually describe that for the listener, and I think that's a hard job. I think it's a lot harder than it looks or sounds. But to do that on the fly without skipping a beat is just it's really impressive, and I think you're gonna do great with it. I can't wait. Like I'll be listening to Sox games this year because I mean I've missed your voice. For me, I'm 25. I'll be 25 in April. For my life, you are the Cubs. I have had no memory of Harry Carey, Jack Brickhouse, or any other broadcaster in the franchise's history. Every single moment has been brought to me by you or Hughes on the radio. I mean, instead of "Hey hey" or "Holy cow," I'm used to saying "Oh baby" when the Cubs get that late game comeback. The point is, Len, is that your voice is ingrained in my everyday life. It rhymes of the baseball season as any of the other names. Your voice carried me through the moments that define seasons, childhoods, and memories. And I've always enjoyed your call, ability to remain progressive in your analysis and commentary of the sport I love so much, baseball. Sadly, an era of Cubs baseball has come to an end, but a new one begins for you on the south side. Thank you so much for everything and just giving me an opportunity to talk to you. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Wow, well said, Christian. I really appreciate, and it means a lot. It really means a lot to me, very personally, that you consider me to be such an important person in that way. And as I said, I cherish all those memories. I take that responsibility very seriously, and I definitely am going to hold you to it. I want you to be a part of our listening audience with the White Sox, and
Yeah,
yeah, it's gonna be a fun ride. I can't wait, and I'm always rooting for the Cubs. They'll always
right.
be in my heart, and I'm a lucky guy.
Yeah, I'd say. No kidding. But thank you so much. I appreciate it, Lon.
You got it. Anytime.